On behalf of Melba, both of us would like to thank all of the members of our committee who put together this wonderful slate of nominees and finally decided upon the 2 recipients this afternoon. We are going to be opening up nominations later in the year for our various criminal justice section awards, and it is not too early to begin thinking about who might be most appropriate, excuse me, as recipients. The first recipient of the award is Monique Worrell. Monique is the duly elected prosecutor of the 9th Judicial Circuit in the state of Florida. And why don't you start to come forward, Monique? As we all know, prosecutors keep our community safe. Their obligation is to promote justice, but in turn, we invest our prosecutors with a good deal of discretion. And as we heard about during one of the panels this morning, prosecutors like Monique are in serious danger in our country. So Monique, we not only want to award you because of what you have accomplished, but we hope that this award will give other prosecutors like you courage to continue. And let me find the appropriate, there we are.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be here with you all this afternoon. I'm going to keep my remarks brief because I understand there's a time limit on them. And although I'm currently a candidate for re-election, this is not the place for me to campaign. We are in a very scary place in modern society. And I believe that we are in a defining moment. And in that defining moment, as lawyers, but simply as citizens, we will have to make a decision as to whether or not we want to be a part of the effort to move us forward or the one that moves us backwards. And someone may be thinking, oh, well, I can just opt out. And I'm here to tell you this afternoon that you cannot, because the decision to opt out is a decision to take part in the movement in our regression in this country. I spent 20 years as a criminal defense attorney. I started my career as a public defender. It was why I went to law school. It was all I ever wanted to do. My family, like many Black and brown families, was impacted by the criminal legal system. My brother, my oldest brother, a retired, well, not retired, but he was discharged from the United States Air Force, so he's a veteran of the United States Air Force, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and PTSD. And like many individuals with that particular diagnosis, he self-medicated with illegal drugs. And because of that, he spent most of my life in and out of the criminal legal system. I saw what it did to my parents. I saw what it did to my family. And I felt the calling on my life at a very young age to do something about it. To not opt out and say that sucks for him, I'm gonna go live my life and do great things. But to recognize that my brother's treatment in the criminal legal system was unjust. That someone who fought for this country in a time of unrest, that someone who had been diagnosed with a mental illness should not be discarded as unworthy and invaluable by this country. So I went to law school, and the only job I ever applied for was to become a public defender. And after being a public defender, I went into private practice. and for 20 years represented individuals one by one, case by case, who had been charged with crimes. I went to become a professor at the University of Florida College of Law, where I became the director of their Criminal Justice Center, where I trained both prosecutors and defense attorneys on the practice of criminal law. And in 2017, I left the University of Florida to become the founding director of the Conviction Integrity Unit at the 9th Judicial Circuit in Orlando, Florida, under my predecessor, the very first African-American to be elected state attorney in the entire state of Florida in 2016, not 1950 anything, but 2016. And the interference with prosecutorial discretion, I think, began there. Because when she decided that it was not the right thing to do as state attorney to seek death, for all of the reasons, the fact that the state of Florida happens to lead the nation in death row exonerations, right, Barry? The fact that 30 people have been exonerated after being sentenced to death in the state of Florida, and that we should do it differently and we should do it right. Then Governor Rick Scott removed every single death eligible case from her purview. He then set the stage for what's currently happening now under the current dictator of the state of Florida. And that is the unconstitutional and unlawful removal of duly elected officials. And what is happening is an attack on democracy, but it's also an attack on us making progress in the criminal legal system that I know all of you in this room know stems from slavery and Jim Crow. And I imagine that many of you have read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and understand that the United States incarcerates more people than anywhere in the world. And as I often say, in the state of Florida, we do it at a rate higher than the national average. And since the time of 2016, many people have taken on the task of reforming what is an unjust criminal system. That we cannot with a straight face say that we have a criminal justice system. Because even though we have this high and alarming rate of incarceration in this country, the people who are most negatively impacted by that are people who look like me. So when you see the resistance to criminal justice reform, understand that it is based in race. Understand that there are people who understand the impact of what it would look like if we actually had a system that was based in equity and fairness and true justice. As a law professor, I started many of my courses by asking my class to define justice. And as was said this morning, the definition of justice is evasive. Because in this very country, at one time, justice was defined as human beings owning other human beings. And it took the work and the resistance and the courage of my ancestors to step up time and time again, along with allies, to say no. So I ask all of you in here today, what side of history will you stand on? What will you do to impact the regression of justice that is taking place right now before our very eyes? The attacks on democracy that is taking place right now before our very eyes. As lawyers, as citizens, what will you do to stand and defend our democracy? And I'll close with this. My colleague, Andrew Warren, is not here right now, but what he didn't tell you this morning is that when we were suspended without pay. And that in the state of Florida, by statute, we as elected prosecutors are prohibited from the private practice of law. So the only way that I earned a living for the last 23 years was with the single swoop of a pen stripped out from under me. And I had many organizations reach out to ask me how they could help. And when I told them, that was the last I heard from them. If you really want to help, if you really want to do the work of defending our democracy, you have to stand up, you have to take a stand, you have to choose a side in this. Because this isn't about being a prosecutor or being a defense attorney, and it isn't about being a Republican or a Democrat. It is about defending our democracy and supporting those who are standing on the front lines, risking it all to do just that, to achieve justice in this system that for far too long has symbolized injustice. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Before we move to our next award, I wanted to highlight for those that are not members of the ABA Criminal Justice Section, our section is like a family. And so that award that we just gave was named after just a really dear friend, active member of our section that we lost too soon. And we really miss Kevin. And so if you're not a member, I hope what you're starting to see is that we try to recognize folks that truly deserve recognition. And so we want to make sure that Elizabeth Kelly and Melva Pearson's jobs as co-chairs of our awards committee is very hard. And we need and we're asking to submit folks that you think really deserve recognition from around the country. That should be one of the hardest working committees because their job should be hard with all the talent that's out there that needs to be recognized. The final point that I'll make on that is that not only is our section like a family, but there's so much that we learn from being able to sit around the table. And if you've ever had a chance to be a member of our ABA House of Delegates, you'll see Professor Salzberg or Neil Sonnet or Wayne McKenzie that get up, that move our resolutions, that talk about our standards that have to be adopted. And a lot of times the first thing that they'll talk about is how we'll have prosecutors advocating for resolutions that help the defense bar or defense attorneys that are advocating for resolutions that are supporting and focusing on prosecutors. So academics, prosecutors, the defense bar, we all try to come together, law enforcement personnel. Our next award is the Albert J. Krieger Champion of Liberty Award. And our recipient is Derwyn Bunton. If you'd like to come up, sir. This award recognizes the defense attorneys who embodied the principles enunciated in the ABA standards for the criminal justice section and the defense function. Mr. Bunton is the Southern Poverty Law Center Chief Legal Officer. He is responsible for the strategic direction of the SPLC's litigation to ensure that every case its attorneys pursue advances the organization's 4 key impact goals: fighting to protect our democracy, dismantling white supremacy, and eradicating poverty and ending mass incarceration. Previously, he led the Orleans Public Defender's Office in Louisiana, where he drew attention from state and national media for his dogged defense of indigent defendant rights. He received his bachelor's degree in political science from San Diego State University and his law degree from New York University School of Law. Please join me in applauding Mr. Bunton.
All right, it is always a danger telling a lawyer they have time to speak. But I want to begin with thank yous. Thank you. I have no idea who to thank for this award. specifically, so I will simply thank the committee. Thank you, Tina, for your leadership in the criminal justice section. This is a real honor for me, a distinct sort of recognition for me from the ABA. The seminal moment in my legal career was an interview I did with a teenager in Tallulah, Louisiana. We were suing the state of Louisiana for how it was treating its children in their juvenile prisons. In 1998, when we filed suit, they had more than 2,000 children in juvenile prisons in the state of Louisiana. And one of those interviews had me on a concrete floor in a horribly under-resourced infirmary across from a teenage boy who sat naked across from me. He had dried blood, scabs over most of his neck and face, and across his chest. And he was naked because the institution had deemed clothing too dangerous for him because of the suicide attempts, the number of suicide attempts he had made. And I remember sitting there asking, it's a conditions case about the food, how many fights he saw, are you getting your 1 hour of large muscle exercise? And thinking, how absurd is this conversation? This boy ain't got no clothes, serious mental health problems, obviously, and you have to go through the interview. And over the course of it, of course, you get answers from your client, and he's talking to me about, he's answering everything. He's, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, Mr. Derwyn, no, Mr. Derwyn. And I'm sitting there thinking, how did we get here? And I'm often pulling myself back to that interview and continuing to learn lessons from that interview. And in this moment, in this critical time, I'm drawn back to that interview once again, and I'm listening now to that young man talk about how he's going to go to school and learn a trade, how he understands that at some point he has to get out, and that he's strong enough to endure. That I'm drawn back to, despite it all, the hope and resilience that came from him in that interview. He held on to his humanity. Is good for those of us in the South had good home training. Yes, sir, no, sir. Had plans for the future. And so, in this moment, I want to talk a little bit about hope, because it's hard to have in these moments. But it can't be any harder than it was for him to have in that moment. He's on a concrete floor, naked, being asked by some lawyer, how's the food? Right? Are you getting your meds? How many fights do you see a day? It can't be harder than that. And so I want to talk about how in this moment, the power we have collectively and individually. When I went to the public defender's office, what I saw was a horribly under-resourced office with really dedicated public defenders, folks who wanted to get better and do better. And I simply had hope we could be better and do better. And so I maintained a sort of vision for the office, which a lot of folks told me was never going to happen. I had one judge tell me, good job becoming chief, enjoy it while it lasts. Your office isn't going to make it, is what he told me. I was told all these things I couldn't do. And we set plans in place to do them, to increase our revenue, to have real training, to be an organization that could hold power accountable, protect innocence, and fight for our clients. And when I started that office, it was a $1.8 million budget for about 30,000 cases. And now, today, because they just went through their last budget cycle, it is a $15 million organization handling 19,000 cases a year. And that's because we had hope. We never forgot where we were headed. And in spite of it all, we kept moving. The other thing we had was resilience. We stayed committed. And this, when I look back on it, it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then. When you're constantly, I remember being called into judges' chambers, and this judge was a so-called friend of mine, and told me, we're filing a bar complaint against you. And I said, who's we? She's like, oh, all the judges. We voted en banc to file a disciplinary complaint against you. And I'm like, I just want you to hear it from me, because you know we're friends. True story. And so I'm like, oh, all right. And so I'm leaving that. I'm pissed. I'm so angry and it was about the changes. We wanted to have vertical representation. We wanted to have training. We got rid of what we called section lawyering, where judges felt like they had their own lawyer there. And so they were mad at all these changes, and so they said I was incompetent and practicing ineffective assistance of counsel. And so they filed the complaint. And then a little while later, I'm like, where did that complaint go? So I called disciplinary counsel. And y'all know this, like all these are secret, right? So they're supposed to be confidential. So I'm not even supposed to know somebody filed something against me. So I called them, and they're like, yes. I'm like, I just need to know where this complaint is. It's like, have you heard from us? I'm like, no, but I know the judges filed, they voted en banc. It's like, yeah, but have you heard from us? Got it. It was dismissed out of hand, right? And we kept fighting. None of that deterred us. We had multiple lawyers. For a time, your booking photo, because literally when you got held in contempt, you got taken out to jail, you got a booking photo. People were putting their booking photos up in their offices. It was a badge of honor. Like, I made it to OPP today. And we kept going. And we kept arguing for more funding. There was zero funding coming from our city council. They were fully funding our DA's office. And we were like, that's not fair, that's not just. And so we had this idea of a parity ordinance. Like whatever they get, and we were modest. Like whatever DA gets, we get 85% of the same. We will acknowledge they have to handle 100% of the cases. Really, we handle 100% too, but whatever. 85%. And folks were like, that is stupid and crazy. You really lost your mind. And it was really the defining moment for me as a chief when we passed the parity ordinance, right? And when we passed the parity ordinance, folks were worried, well, they could just ignore it. And I'm like, I don't think they're going to ignore it. Otherwise, why would they pass it? Why would the city council pass something they were going to ignore? And so fast forward to today, like all that for taking all those licks, all the contempt, being told you were powerless, being told it'll never happen, we passed this ordinance. And fast forward to today, my successor calls like, I didn't get my budget call. I'm like, oh shit. I've left, and now they feel like they can do crazy stuff to my office. And he called back, he's like, well, I called, like you said to call. And they said, we didn't call you because of the parity ordinance. It's like, we don't need a meeting with you for you to present. Like, we just tie you to the DA. And by the way, DA is getting an increase and so are you. And he's like, okay. and that's where we are today. And one final story on that road is I had us, as we're in these battles, I went to a city council presentation. They treated us like dirt for a long time in budget presentations. In one moment, I'm talking to a city council member who's also a friend. And I said, we go in there every day and we get really disrespected. We go there every time at budget time, we get really disrespected. And we are nothing but gracious and show nothing but grace. And his response to me, who are you to be gracious? And at this point, I'm like, oh, this is Derwyn growing up in the hood time. This conversation. Who are you to be gracious? And I said, we are not powerless. And I can show you better than I can tell you. And he's like, what does that mean? I'm like, I wasn't subtle. I can show you better than I can tell you. And in those months and years later, we did I showed them. Our office showed them we were not powerless. And we're not powerless now. When we refused to take cases, we had Ellen come and testify, and Barry come and testify, and Bob Rukowitz come and testify. They were like, he's never gonna actually stop. I'm like, oh, watch. And when things started backing up, folks were like, you can't do that. I'm like, you can put me in jail, you can hold me in contempt, but that ain't gonna put a lawyer in your courtroom. It just puts me in jail. I didn't have a great time. I talk to clients, hang out. But your cases still won't move. Right? And then all of that fight, all of that getting knocked down and getting back up, that's where we are today. That's what and I'm excited about my new role because now I get to run around and sue all sorts of systems to try and hold folks accountable for the things they're doing that are unjust, unequitable, unconstitutional. We recently won a case in Mississippi where we held permanent, lifetime felony disenfranchisement is a violation of the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. And me and one of my deputy legal director, I'm like, we did not see that one coming. This was the 5th Circuit who decided this. It's now up on bond. But what that did, that added, depending on estimates, somewhere between 12 and 16% to the voting population in Mississippi. 12 to 16% of folks who could not vote. That changes the landscape. That flips an election. That's the transformational work I want to continue doing, and only building on the transformational work we did in New Orleans. So all of that I want to give to folks understanding this tough time. Just 2 things that came out of those struggles that I've learned with and had so many great colleagues, Tina among them, who were like, most of the time our meetings, it was just Tina being like, glad I'm not in Louisiana. that seems hard. But the advice, the counsel, the support was important. So one, like my client on that floor, do not lose your humanity. Your ability to notice the water. Sometimes we get in our routines and we don't realize the ordinary injustice we have. And lean into community. Help build it and help build constituency for yourself, for your work, because none of what I just said would have happened if we had ignored community. We actually built constituency. in those moments. It really showed up during the George Floyd demonstrations when there was a demonstration outside City Hall and shots rang out. Police drove to the site of the shots. They detained someone who they said they didn't believe had anything to do with the shooting, but had put her in the back of a police car. The crowd surrounded the police car. And one of the leaders of the protest got on the bullhorn and said, "We need a public defender." Because they knew we were out there. Because we had been standing proximate now for years with our community. We need a public defender. One of my supervisors steps forward, goes talk to the police, tell the police, are they detained? You think they didn't? No, they didn't do it. Think they're a witness? No, you just want, it's like, you can't hold them. And the police, I was like, what? Yeah, you can't hold them, you can't keep them in that car. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. Can't keep them in that car. Police huddle up, get on their walkie-talkies, go back in, pull her out the car, unlock the handcuffs, crowd opens up, police car drives away. That's the power we have together, right? Lean into community, build it, and build your constituency. I'm here to say that these are not bright times, but we can be bright lights within them. We can change the landscape, because we always have to remember the empire always strikes back. We get gains, and then they come back. We elect Barack Obama, they elect Donald Trump. Empire always strikes, but what cannot change is our hope and our resilience. And I take this recognition as validation that that is important, and that is meaningful, that is transformational. And I ask you all to remain hopeful, remain resilient, and thank you.
The third award that we'd like to give today is the 2023 William W. Greenhalgh Student Writing Competition. This is sponsored by the Criminal Justice Section, and the goal of the competition is to encourage law students to become involved in our section, and it's also to hopefully attract students to the practice of criminal law and to encourage scholarship in our field. And of course, I love my paper. This year's award winner is Simone Edwards. Simone is a Fritz Fellow at the Center on Privacy and Technology and a 3L student at Georgetown University Law Center. Her research and career interests center on the intersection of law and technology. And in talking to her just now, she's got great plans to figure out how exactly to do that and change the conversation. Her article, which is the title I love, is Security as a Superstition, the Constitution as a Potential Ritual. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause.
I will be very, very brief. I am very blessed to win this award. I know that there were a lot of great essays, so I'm just grateful that I was chosen, but also just for the opportunity to think and write about such an important topic. As you all know, law school is a lot. So winning this is just giving me the fuel that I need to keep pushing and keep going and pursue my goals. So thank you.
So we've made great time today, but I did want to reflect on the inspiration that was just shared by Monique and Derwyn. And to really focus in on those two themes. What are we going to do in this moment? And how, when we do it, we have hope and humanity. So I stand here, a lifelong public defender. And there are times, and those of you who know, that I have called out prosecutors and mayors and governors. In New York, we have a very different thing in that I work for a nonprofit. So I have an independence to call out when things are wrong. And while I may get a phone call from my board, I'm not going to be removed. So as I was thinking about my year, what policies would I take on? One would think she's gonna do something for defense, right? Public defense. And look, again, lifelong. But there is a growing movement in this country, a growing movement, that is defense counsel, whether you are a public defender or a private defense counsel, whether you are operating in the as a federal public defender or a city or a white-collar attorney, that we have to be concerned about. Because the chilling effect of removing Andrew and Monique, the threat in Georgia, the threat in Texas, the threat in New York City, when our DA, Alvin Bragg, announced a policy day one to say, I am going to do things differently, even here in New York City. The rumor is he was called into the governor's office to have a chat. Now, of course, Alvin is still in office, and later today is joining us to talk about courageous leadership. But if we, as public defenders and defense attorneys, don't stand up in this moment for prosecutors who are doing right by our clients, we're in trouble. Now, that's not to say that there are those who violate ethics and wrongful convictions, and that has to be called out too. But at the same time, I'm also a public defender that is watching my friend Keisha and Dean be fired. Hear about Steve in Luzerne. And so many other defenders who don't have the benefit of the independence I have, that I still keep my job when I call out our mayor for being regressive. When I call out our police commissioner and call for his resignation because his police force has done harm. When we call out Rikers, and the atrocity that happens there every day, I get to keep the job I love. So, I also know the power of this place, the criminal justice section, and the ABA. So it's a moment. I have called upon the formation of two task forces, one to look at the independence of the prosecutor, and the other to look at the independence of public defenders. Those task forces will begin working very shortly, separate but partnered and allied, to look at the policies we have that we can use, the policies we need that are going to address the specific concerns of today, and more importantly, to build on the public education that has to take place, because it cannot just be a movement of lawyers. We're good at what we do. But what I also know as a public defender, and what I saw play out in New York around our discovery laws, is if it weren't for the inclusion of those most impacted by what's happening, things don't change really. So, more to come. And when they are convened, there'll be a call for all of us in this room and all of our members and the larger ABA to begin to figure out very quickly the strategy to roll this back. So I leave that for today to say thank you, Monique, Derwyn, for the inspiration to continue the fight and to actually use our collective community, both here in the room, but the impacted community, to actually show we're not going to back down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina. I'm going to ask my co-chair, Professor Sarah Redfield, to join me, but I'm going to talk a little bit while she's coming up here. I want to...
Because she's so slow, as we all know.
No, that's not because of that, because time is of the essence. I want to say that this has been a tremendous ceremony, and all of our honorees are so well deserving of the awards, and so we congratulate you and we thank you for your work that you're doing in your various professional vineyards. A couple of things I want to say. One, we have heard so much about the time and the space we're in today. I believe Defender Bunton said that we're in a dark place right now, and that he encouraged all of us to use our light to make certain that we lighted a path for others to get in and do this work, and we thank you for that. What I want to say to you is we have great laws as a country. We've always had great laws. But I want to remind you afresh, as they say, that the law in and of itself are just words on a paper. They have no hands, no eyes, no feet, no heart. We, the men and women of courage, men and women of conviction, men and women of vision, we give the law life. And we also can use the law to do justice. It is that perseverance, that commitment, the shining of that light, the standing strong in the face of tremendous obstacles that really makes the law a tool to level the playing field for those who are impacted by the law. You know, many of the people who are mounting these cases against you are waving the banner of Christianity, but in the book of Leviticus, it's chapter 19, verse 15, it says that do not pervert justice. And what we're seeing today is a perversion of that justice, and we're all admonished to let our lights shine. Let each one of those lights provide an illumination that does not allow us as a country to regress, as Prosecutor Monique told us. In closing, I just want to say to you that we, men and women, are the guardians of justice, and we will define that justice. And so we must allow ourselves, we must put our hands and our bodies really on the line for justice. It's been said that we can live as a people, we can live days without food. We can live days without water, but we cannot live a day without hope. You give us hope. And I want to ask right now, Prosecutor Monique, Defender Bunton, and the future, Ms. Simone Edwards to come forward and let us present you a copy of this work, because you indeed are extending justice, and we want to give you strategies to increase inclusion and reduce bias, because you've seen that in your work. And if you all would just stand right there for a second while they take our picture. Come on. Tia, would you join us? For those of you who did not receive a book, or you did not receive an award, I want you to know that you can have this treasure for a nominal price, I believe, of $62. And, as I said previously, if you need to give a gift to the person who has everything, it's great for graduations, birthdays, Christmas, bar mitzvahs, and all holidays. And if you just want to be a friend, give them a book. Okay?